Thank you.
The head of the Parliamentary Committee on Intelligence, Tehan, has indicated he's expecting the government to adopt the more than 30 recommendations for change in its counter-terrorism laws. The committee handed down its report on the Foreign Fighters Bill currently before Parliament on Friday and has proposed changes that would both strengthen the safeguards in the laws and increase oversight. I spoke to Mr Tehan a short time ago. Tehan, welcome to Capitol Hill. If I can ask you first, are the changes that the government has proposed in the Foreign Fighters Bill all absolutely necessary? Because some of those laws are already in place and not due to expire till 2016.
Well, they are, because we have, sadly, a circumstance in Australia where we have to be doing all we can to making sure that our agencies can deal with this heightened security threat. So I think the government is correct in putting forward the changes that it has put forward. But that doesn't mean that our committee didn't need to oversight that legislation, have a look at it and see where some changes needed to be made.
You did recommend a number of areas where there was stronger safeguards and more oversight was needed. Did the government overreach a little bit?
Oh, I don't think they overreached. They consulted with the intelligence agencies, with the federal police and with the community, and then put in the legislation what it thought on balance needed to be done. Obviously the committee has had another look at that, and we have put forward some recommendations, but the important thing was we heard evidence from both the Ombudsman and the Inspector General of Intelligence and Security saying that they have the oversight powers to be able to deal with this legislation.
But clearly the committee felt in some instances there weren't enough safeguards or there was need for more oversight, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. We've on balance considered, and you've got to remember this is a bipartisan committee, so we have to look at it in that bipartisan spirit, and that's what we've done. And we've made some changes which I think will improve and enhance the oversight, but obviously it'll be up to the government now to decide whether the committee's report does go down the path that they want it to go.
One of the changes you recommended was to have shorter sunset clauses than the 10 years the government proposed. 10 years, is it just too long for a sunset clause?
Well, look, the committee looked at this in some detail, and our view was that there probably is a need to have a proper review process and bring that sunset period forward. So what we want to see is the INSLM have a look at that. That's the Independent National Security Legislator Monitor. Have a look at the new laws, and then the committee itself to have a look at the new laws and then decide which way we should go on it.
Although under the existing laws on control and prevention orders, which would be extended by these laws, there was already a review in place. Doesn't this show that another government can just put in another piece of legislation and effectively bypass the review process that's already in place and just put it off a few more years?
Well, one of the things that we took evidence on was exactly that really it's up to each individual parliament to decide what laws should or shouldn't be passed or should or shouldn't remain on the statute books. But what we've done is we've suggested that, well, there is a bit of a safety mechanism that we can put in there for the next parliament so that they will look at this in detail. And I think that's the important thing. You might have a parliament which decides in of it itself that that these laws are no longer valuable or no longer required. But what we've done is said, here's a reminder that you need to look at this. And I think it's a very sensible way forward.
On the question of collecting biometrics, you've suggested legislation, not regulation, if that's to expand to eye scans and fingerprints. That could still happen though, and there's no clear idea yet that will be stored securely and no clear idea of exactly who will have access to it. Now, the Privacy Commissioner is going to have a look at that. Would you expect that clarity to come from the Privacy Commissioner's report?
I would, and that's why we've recommended that the Privacy Commissioner have a look at that and report back to the government by the middle of next year. I think it's important that the Australian community knows that the security is there in place when it comes to storing this type of data, and that is why we've decided to go down this path.
Your committee wants more powers to oversee more provisions in the legislation. There's also the Privacy Commissioner and the Ombudsman and the Inspector General of Intelligence Securities. Can any of those bodies tell the government what to do, or is it all advice?
Well, I mean, that they can recommend things to the government and then the government has to decide what it wants to do. Now, when things are recommended to the government needs to put up some pretty good reasons to go against that advice. Otherwise, people like yourself, Lyndall, will hold the government to account. So I think there is the necessary checks and balances there, and they are very public checks and balances. So I think the Australian community can be assured that there are processes in place to hold the government to account.
Now, one final issue. The presiding officers of the Parliament have backed down on their decision to have people wearing head coverings such as burqas in the chambers behind glass in an enclosed space. Jackie Lambie's come out and said that helps extremists. Is there anything about that ban that would have prevented terrorism, or did it just go a bit too far?
Look, in my view, the Prime Minister got this right when he said that this went a step too far. I think we have a wonderful Parliament. I love the fact that the people can come here and they can walk over the top of the Parliament, walk over the top of their elected representatives. It is a magnificent building. The access to it is something that we should preserve for everyone. So I think the Prime Minister got this call right.
Dan Tehan, thank you very much
Thank
for your
you,
time.
Lyndall. Cheers.